Okay, so are you ready to really dig into this topic?
Right.
You've asked us to explore this whole idea of embracing change, and
And it's a big one.
it is a big one.
Yeah.
And luckily, we've got some really interesting material to work with today. We're going to be diving into excerpts from a podcast script. Would you believe it?
Meta.
Yeah, so meta, right? It's called Embracing Change, How to Thrive in Life's Transitions. It's from Mandishi Yamabandikwa. So, as always, we're going to be pulling out the most interesting bits and kind of
Yeah, have a little fun with it.
exactly. And this script, I gotta say, it jumps right in. It starts by comparing change to like a fundamental force of nature, something constant, unavoidable.
hmm And they give a pretty powerful example right off the bat, actually. Steve Jobs getting fired from Apple.
Oh, wow, yeah. I'd actually kind of forgotten about that whole chapter.
Right. But it's a perfect illustration of their point.
It is, because the script highlights how Jobs viewed being fired, not as this career-ending failure, but as a redirection.
Yeah, a chance for growth. And that's a crucial mental shift the script really encourages. Instead of asking, why me? When faced with change, we should be asking, what can I learn from this?
It's about reframing. Instead of the setback, it's the setup or something.
Exactly.
Which honestly is way easier said than done when you're like, yeah, no," you know, when you're in that difficult situation. But this idea of controlling your response,
Yeah.
your attitude, like even when everything feels chaotic, that's powerful stuff.
Because it puts you back in the driver's seat.
Right.
Right. You're not just being tossed around by change. You have agency in how you experience it. You have choices.
So how do we actually do that? How do we
Hmm.
go from feeling overwhelmed by change to like actually embracing it?
Well, it seems like they get into that in this script. One of the things they really emphasize is this idea of, focusing on what you can control, which I think is huge because so much of the time, when you're dealing with change, it's like you feel powerless.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in that feeling of being overwhelmed. But this script, it reminds you to take a step back, to zoom out a little and see that even in the midst of all that uncertainty, there are still areas where you have agency.
So it's not about like pretending the change isn't happening.
Right.
It's more about choosing how you're going to respond.
Exactly. And they illustrate this with a really powerful example, actually. The podcast host, he talks about losing his job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Talk about change that can just like throw you for a loop, you know?
absolutely. But instead of panicking, instead of letting that define the situation, he chose to focus on what he could control. His mindset, his actions, and he used that time, that period of uncertainty, to learn new skills, explore different interests, and that ultimately led him to create the podcast itself.
So he turned this like potentially devastating event into a creative turning point.
Exactly. And this actually brings us to another key takeaway from the script: the importance of staying open to new possibilities. Because change, even when it's difficult, even when it's unexpected, it often has a way of kind of pushing us in directions we never would have considered on our own.
It's like that saying, when one door closes, another one opens.
Yeah.
But you have to be willing to look for that open door, right? But how do we actually cultivate that openness? Especially when, by nature, change can be kind of scary.
It's about perspective. Instead of approaching change from this place of fear, like, oh no, what if it's bad? What if you approached it with curiosity? Like, I wonder what I might discover here.
It's like, yeah, instead of being afraid of the unknown, you're kind of leaning into it.
Exactly. And that ties into this whole idea of growth mindset, which we see like woven throughout this whole script. It's that belief that you can learn and adapt and become more resilient through these challenges.
So it's not just about getting through the change. It's about actually using it as fuel to, like, level up.
Exactly. And honestly, one of the most practical takeaways from the Embracing Change script is this. They actually encourage you to ask yourself a simple question: what can I learn from this?
Instead of that why me thing we all do.
Yes. Reframing that question, it can be so powerful. Like, it shifts you from feeling like a victim to a place of like, okay, I have some agency here. Let's see what I can learn.
Because at the end of the day, change is going to happen, right? Whether we want it to or not.
It's the one constant.
It is. So it's like we might as well figure out how to work with it
Mhm.
instead of constantly feeling like we're fighting against it.
100%. This whole deep dive, it really just drives home the point that embracing change, it's a journey, right? It's not like you arrive at this destination where you're suddenly good at dealing with change and that's it.
It's a practice.
It is. And some days are going to be harder than others. Some changes are going to be tougher to navigate. But like anything else, the more we practice this idea of, okay, how do I approach this with curiosity, with that growth mindset, the more natural it becomes.
It's like building a muscle.
Exactly.
So to wrap things up, it sounds like what we're taking away from this is change is inevitable.
Hmm.
But our attitude towards it, that's something we can control. Maybe what seems like a negative change, like losing a job or whatever it is, could actually be an opportunity. Definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us.